Namaste. Well, we're still here, but not at the moment. This is a recorded program for you tonight. And as such, we won't have any questions and certainly no answers tonight. And I'm going to introduce you to Michael Sternfeld in a moment, who, an old friend of mine who's lived his life inside Valmiki's Ramayana. And tonight the program is going to be, we're going to discuss this project that we've done, which is we've recorded all the thoughts and words of Hanuman in the Ramayana. And it's an incredible program, and Michael will tell you about it when he comes on in a minute. But as usual, I'd like to start with some Oms and the HANUMAN'S. So let's do that. Pranavam Pavanukuma Kalabana Pavak Gyanagan Jasuhradaga Basairam Sarachapadhar Atulita Baladham Himshalabadeham Tanujavarna Krishna Yani Nama Graganyam Sakala Guna Nidhanam Vanaranam Adhisham Raghupati Priya Bhaktam Atajatam Namami Goshpadi Krutavarisham Mashiki Krutarakshasam Ramayana Mahamalaratnam Vande Nilatmajam Anjananandanam Viram Janaki Shokanashanam Kapisamaksahanta Vande Lanka Bhayankaram Langya Sindho Salilam Salilam Yashokavahi Janakatma Jaya Adayatane Dadahalanka Namamitam Pranjali Aranjanayam Manojavam Maruttatulya Vegam Jitendriyam Buddhimatam Vardashtam Vatatmajam Vanarayutamukham Shri Ramadutam Sharanam Prapadye Shri Ramadutam Sharanam Prapadhe Shri Ramadutam Sharanam Prapadhe Anjaneyam Tipatalanam Kanchanadri Kamani Avigraham parijat taramudavasana bhavayami pavamananandanam yatra yatra raghunatha kirtana tatra tatra kritamastakhanjalim Pashpavare paripurna lochanam Martinamat rakshasantakam Ulavajaranga bali Hanuman ki jai. Shri Ramadutam Sharanam Prapadye. I take refuge, I go for refuge and shelter in the messenger of Ram, the ambassador of Ram, the one who brings Rama's presence to us, the awareness of his presence, of that presence, our true nature, the love that lives within us as who we truly are. So now we're going to invite Michael to come on.
Thank you. Thank you, Krishna Das. Hi there. Always, as soon as you start chanting, just drop right in. It's great.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting project that it was Michael's idea originally, and he came to me with it. We decided to do a little bit together. First of all, the version of the Ramayana that I'm mostly acquainted with is Tulsidasa's Ramayana, which was written in the 1600s, and it's more of a devotional text. It's a text, actually, of how to develop devotional practice and devotional awareness. It's all about the same story as Hanuman and Ram's incarnation, but it's from a different angle. Partially because the world had changed so much since the original time of Valmiki, which might have been, I don't know, Michael, 5,000 years ago or more? Something.
Maybe 14,000 years ago, actually. I know it blows some minds for people, but let's say it's a long, long time ago.
It was before I was born. Unbelievable.
That far back, yeah.
A little bit. So for me, this project has been really great because the way Rama, Hanuman, Sita, and the whole story is told by Valmiki is very different than the way Tulsidas tells it. And I think partially because in that age, people were much more open and much more aware and could see and feel in a different way than in our current age of the Kali Yuga, where the light is buried very deeply within us. And so Tulsidas was providing a methodology for us to get down into there and open up. Whereas Valmiki was telling a story that everybody could understand, really, in those days. So, yeah, what should we do?
So, yeah, I just want to chime in a little bit on Valmiki Ramayana because in this whole community, in the Krishna Das community, in the Nimkroli Baba community, there's this deep love and outpouring for Tulsidas Ramayana. And I've been 30 years on Valmiki Ramayana. And as I'm becoming, tuning more into Hanuman, there's this devotional blossoming. But the Valmiki Ramayana, it's so profound in the sense of the whole story is fleshed out. And as you said in the beginning, Krishna Das, you said, I've been living inside the Ramayana. But now it's flip-flopped, where the Ramayana is living inside of me. And that's what's really happening. It reminded me, actually, when you were saying that, of a famous Rumi poem, where he says, I've been living on the lip of insanity, trying to know reasons, knocking on the door. The door opens. I've been knocking from the inside. And that's the way I feel with the Ramayana. I've been knocking on the door, but actually I've been knocking from the inside, because the beauty of the Valmiki Ramayana, it was Vedic cognition. During these Vedic times when Valmiki went deep inside his mind's eye and cognized at Brahma's injunction. The actual creator, Brahma himself, told Valmiki, go inside your mind's eye, see this entire story of Ram. And then these 26,000 couplet verses came pouring out of him. And this is Vedic literature. It's Veda. Veda is living reality. It's the fabric of reality. It's the fabric of our own reality inside of us. So when you listen to the Ramayana, it really is like listening to ourself. So that's my little preamble, excuse me, on Valmiki Ramayana. But, we wanted to, before we unveil this project that Krishna Das and I have been collaborating on for the last 6 months or so, and it's been a very beautiful collaboration. I'm going to go into the background of the project itself. Is I wanted to just give some background on Hanuman himself, and this is the question that's being asked of Krishna Das all the time. I've heard it on some of his Chai and Chat broadcasts, where people always ask him, "Who is Hanuman? Who is Hanuman?"
You're asking me?
I'm asking you to just because I'm going to, during these conversations Krishna Das and I have had over the last 6 months, where we got together, I don't know, half a dozen or more times, or more actually, and we would just tell stories. He would tell me stories about Neem Karoli Baba and Hanuman and just, unfolding all his knowledge of Hanuman. And what I love about Krishna Das is this is a living reality for him. This is what I discovered. This is not some knowledge in the head or knowledge in the book. This is a living reality for Krishna Das. So what's your latest take on who is Hanuman?
Ramdas had given me his copy of Tulsidasa's Ramayana after I met him, after he had come back from India the first time. And when I first met Ramdas, I had an extraordinary experience, which was that when I walked into the room where he was sitting, immediately, instantaneously, without a word spoken, without eye contact, I walked into the room, I had this powerful, that I knew that whatever it was I was looking for was real. And it was like falling in love. Like when you first fall in love with someone, you see them, but I hadn't even really seen Ramdas yet. I just walked into the room and I had this experience of falling into love and falling into the fact that this is real and you could really find this. So then he gave me, later on as we got to know each other better, he gave me a copy of his copy of the Tulsidasa's Ramayana. And as I started to read it, it's all about the same thing. That first feeling that I had when I walked into that room, falling into that love, opening into that love. And every 2 seconds into the story, people are just opening into that place, and then Tulsidas goes on and describes. So, and essentially, you could say it's the way Hanuman experiences Rama. He doesn't see him only as a physical being. He experiences him on multi-levels. And the deepest level is the oneness between himself and Rama, of the whole universe. And so when I met Maharaji, which is actually what that first experience was I was meeting him when I walked into that room, I understood that I felt that love. And I knew that love was Hanuman's love of Ram. And then we found out that Maharaji was believed to be an actual incarnation of Hanuman himself. And the more we got to know the Indian devotees and we began to see how they saw Maharaji, everything fell into place for me. That first hit that I got when I met Ram Dass, the same hit I got when I read the Ramcharitmanas, Tulsidas Ramayana, the same thing I feel when I experience Maharaji. So everything I know about Hanuman, I know through my relationship with Maharaji, my guru. And it's not that the guru is one thing, the guru is everything. So as I lose less and less of my egocentric identity and merge with the service and the love that Hanuman, that's how my understanding of things grows. So Maharaji himself said that Hanuman is the breath of Ram, the very breath of Ram. You know, I've been thinking about that for 50 years. I still don't get it. It's above my pay grade still. So I'm just working on that, trying to understand and experience the reality of what it is to be completely free of delusion of separateness, and then again serving everyone, serving all the beings who think they are separate, which is what Hanuman does, because he sees Ram in every being. He sees the true nature of each being. And he lives only to remove that suffering that comes from separateness. I hope that's totally unclear.
That was, you know, when I listening to Krishna Das, it always evokes an experience, because a voice is a kind of a cumulative record of everything we've experienced in our lifetime. The print of one's voice, the tone of one's voice, and I think Hanuman is just soaked into your voice, Krishna Das, and you know, it evoked some thoughts for me about this relationship between Ram and Hanuman. I have to admit, up until this last year, all my attention was on Ram. Ram. I guess I was a Ram just for the last 30 years since I got exposed to the Ramayana by my teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. All my attention has been on Ram, doing productions of the Ramayana. My background is actually, people think of me as a Ramayana scholar. I'm actually a Ramayana producer. I'm actually a producer. I work for David Lynch, the filmmaker, on and off with his foundation. And my whole idea is to create productions of the Ramayana that brings out the knowledge to the Ramayana to the West, for people to make it more accessible. So over the years I created a theme park based on the Ramayana. The thing that I did, which as I said was maybe the most significant, was I spent 7 years recording the first complete audio production of the unabridged Ramayana of Valmiki, which was just a real labor of love. Talk about focusing on the Ramayana. 7 years to take this longest book in the world, actually second longest book in the world after the Mahabharata, and do a full-length audio production, a dramatized reading in English of the unabridged Ramayana of Valmiki. And so I got seeped deeply into the Ramayana, trying to bring this out, but all my attention was on Ram. And this last winter, it was in the beginning of 2020, I was asked by the Neem Karoli Baba Ashram in Taos, New Mexico, to teach a course for them on the Ramayana to this community. It was called the Ramayana, a guidebook for spiritual development. And this is how I connected with Krishna Das. He came in and sang at the end of some of the lessons. And I have to give appreciation to Hanuman Das, who runs the Neem Karoli Baba Ashram in Taos. He said, you know, in our community, we are into Hanuman. So Michael, you need to turn your attention to Hanuman. And someone of the people who took the course said, Michael, you already know Hanuman because all your attention has been on Ram. And that felt pretty good to me. That felt pretty good. And slowly, this idea, I'm kind of telling a long roundabout story of how this project came about, and also talking about my relationship with Ram and Hanuman. I had done in 2014, I went through my entire production of the Ramayana, and I pulled out everything Ram says on Dharma, the subject of Dharma. It's called Ram's Dharma, Leadership Secrets of the Ultimate Warrior Sage Prince. And I always had in the back of my mind that I would do that for Hanuman. So now I had the cue to do this, inspired by Hanuman Das. And then I knew that Krishna Das would be just a softie on anything to do with Hanuman. And I gave the idea of the project that I wanted to go through the entire Ramayana and pull out everything Hanuman says, does, and thinks in the Ramayana. Extract all those excerpts and then weave it together with our commentary. So that has been the nature of this. And through the process, this is what I wanted to say, the process of this growing affinity to Hanuman, I began to see it was just like what Krishna Das just said. Hanuman, Ram is quite abstract. He's transcendental reality. He's the embodiment of totality, wholeness. It's the whole enchilada. Ram is the embodiment of totality. Hanuman is our doorway to open up into that, because that's abstract. But Hanuman, through his heart, his service, his love, his devotion, he's the doorway for us to go into Ram, into that wholeness of life. So that's what's been beginning to unfold for me in this process of imbibing Hanuman. So now this seems like it might be a good time to have a little unveiling of this project that we keep talking about, which is, let's take a look at the cover of Hanuman's Leap of Faith, with the subtitle, Harnessing the Power of Love and Devotion in Our Lives. So there you can see that beautiful image of B.G. Sharma and those little insets, those two classic images of Ram embracing Hanuman and Hanuman restoring Sita's faith, this is what the title is all about, Hanuman's Leap of Faith. So, Krishna Das, you were just saying one comment you mentioned to me once about this doorway, Hanuman being the doorway. That's something in the Hanuman Chalisa, isn't it?
Yeah. Ram duare tu marakovare, hotana agya binu pesare. You're the doorway that leads to Ram, and no one can go without your grace, without your blessing.
So let's go into those blessings a little bit more, because I got my second question for you, something that you always go into, which is, and you've already started to answer that, is how is it that our attention, we're going to come back talking about the project in a moment, but I just want to set the stage a little more here, is how is it that our attention, our experience of Hanuman creates a field of transformation in our life and helps really speed up our personal evolution?
Well, there's a shloka in Sanskrit. I haven't been able to find out where it comes from, or from where it comes. And it says that Hanuman not only bestows liberation by allowing the devotees to merge with his own state. He not only does that, but he also makes it possible for the devotees to satisfy the desires that they have that need to be satisfied. This is a really interesting statement, because in the lineage of Hanuman is not one or the other. In fact, Maharaji himself was married and had 3 children. And so it's not a renunciation trip. It's more of an acceptance trip and an unveiling of what is real in life. And Hanuman allows us to merge with his state. That's how he liberates us. I don't know how it works. I don't even know what that means, really. It's just words to me. But because of my experience with Maharaji, I understand that he lets us in the room where real love lives. and then our stuff takes us out. Our thoughts, our emotions, our negative stuff pulls us out. But then he lets us in again. And it's interesting, one time Maharaji looked at this, one of the ladies, the American women there, and he said, "Why do you love me?" And she said, "I don't know." He said, "You love me because I love you." So you see, it's Hanuman, it's love that comes and gets us and opens us up, because we're buried underneath all our crap. But that love shines on us. It's the sun burning through the clouds around us. It's the light of the sun that does the work, not us. So it's very similar with Hanuman. That love, that intensity of his Shakti, his power, his beauty, his wisdom, uncovers what's within us from within and allows us to merge with him. And in the process, he allows us, what happens is we're also able to satisfy the things that we need to satisfy in life. We come into this life with lots of desires. And a lot of times we're taught that desires are bad and you've got to get rid of them. But it's not really, in this path, it's not really like that. Not all desires are bad. Some are necessary to satisfy. Karmically for you, you have to get through something. You have to have it and experience it and then move on. And that's what Hanuman allows us to do. Yeah. And so we want to become like Hanuman. We want to be free. See, nothing stops him. He has ultimate power. He can do anything. But everything he does is in service of that love, which is Rama. Everything he does.
Yeah, that juxtaposition between Hanuman's power and Shakti, that he is serving Ram, it always amazed me. I mean, I'll share one of my deep desires my whole life is to have this living presence of Ram in my heart. Just living presence of Ram. And living presence, and I should define that for some people. Maybe not everyone knows what that, in that word, which both Nimkroli Baba and my Maharaji and also Maharishi talked about, in that, just in the name Ram, so much potency and power. But the experience of Ram for me, it's the only way I can describe it is it's like the light of life. Ram is the light of life in the heart of everyone. It's that light of life. And the living presence of Ram would be that light of that wholeness of life. And something that Maharishi once said is that it's that Ram is that eternal law of life that establishes and maintains harmony in all relationships, which harmonizes everything with every other thing in the universe. It's the knit together wholeness of life. It's the experience of unity. And I remember when I was preparing for that course for the Ramayana Guidebook for Spiritual Development, and I really felt that I was teaching to Maharaji's, Nimkroli Baba's people, and I just wanted to get some inner guidance of how would he want it? How would he like this to be? Just tuned into my inner guidance. And I remember I was quite bold. The message I got was, if this course does not establish the living presence of Ram in the people's heart who take this, it'll be a failure. I was like, whoa, okay. You have to establish the living presence of Ram or the course is a failure. So I said, okay, me first. And that's the desire that I have. And that's what I'm hoping is unfolding. And Hanuman seems to be the pathway to do that. And that's why that image, there's that beautiful image of Hanuman opening his chest. You know, why don't we take a look at that image right now of just the way we see it in all the iconography. Hanuman's opening his chest, and Ram and Sita are there. And it's a metaphor, maybe it's a reality. It's in Tulsidas Ramayana, where when Hanuman, he said, Vibhishana asked, where is Ram and Sita? And Hanuman shows him. Vibhishana was Ravana's brother and now the king of Lanka. And Hanuman opens up his chest. That's the quality of feel. Oh, good. So go ahead.
After the war was over and everybody was happy and back home and back on this side, and all the monkeys were there, and Ram and Sita and then Hanuman. And Mother Sita was so happy that she gave Ram this pearl necklace that had been given to her, I think, by Indra or something like that. And so he looks at it, and he bites a bead, and he throws it away. He bites another bead, throws it away, bites. And Sita says, Hanuman, what are you, foolish monkey? What are you doing? You know how valuable that necklace is? It's like, from the gods, it's so valuable. And Hanuman says, Ma, nothing is valuable to me without Sitaram inside. So she says, oh, really? Where's Sitaram inside of you? And that's when he takes his fingernail and cuts his heart open, goes like this, and shows her that Sitaram inside his own heart. And that's the story, that nothing is really of any value unless it has Sitaram inside. Unless it has that reality inside of it. Everything else comes and goes, but only that stays.
And look at what Ram and Sita embody. Ram is this absolute level of life, this Purushottam it's called, the unchanging wholeness of life, absolute level. Sita is Prakriti, the divine feminine. And so you put those both together, and then you have the absolute silence and the Shakti working together. And Hanuman just, he's tuned into that, and he's actually on the same level of that. It's an interesting mixture. Krishna Das, maybe you can comment on that, where, Hanuman just completely serves Ram. But as we learn more and more, he's an equal in his power and Shakti. How is that? Between Vishnu and Hanuman, how is it that Hanuman serves this wholeness, even though he seems to be almost on that same level as Ram?
This is really beyond me, but one thing, we talked about this before. You said you looked through all the Ramayanas, you didn't find it, but there is that story where Ram asks Hanuman, how do you see me? And Hanuman replies, he said, when I identify with the body, I serve you. When I identify with the soul, you are the whole and I am a part. But when I know the truth, you and I are one. So there's different levels of reality. They all have their own rules and regulations. So on the level of physicality, Hanuman is always busy serving. But he knows the truth. He knows the other levels as well. And yet still, his humility and the compassion he has for suffering, to liberate the Ram within us, in a way, to free our own hearts so we can see and experience the God within us. He's always busy doing that. There's a line in the HANUMAN'S where it describes Hanuman as sitting, whenever there's no service to do, he's found sitting at the foot of the Parijata tree, his eyes red with tears of love, bhavana, with tears of emotion for Ram. That's his natural state. He chooses to stay separate to serve and experience that love and the devotion.
By the way, I did finally found where that came from. Our colleague Philip Lutgendorf pointed me in the direction. It's in the Adhyatma Ramayana. That's where that piece was. People attribute it to the Tulsidas Ramayana. It's Adhyatma Ramayana, which is like the spiritual version of the Ramayana, told through the eyes of Sita. But that levels that you talked about going through, So maybe I'll comment a little bit on levels and its relationship to this project now. It's going through the Ramayana, pulling out everything Hanuman says, does, and thinks, which is the centerpiece. As I said, I pulled out 40 passages from the great epic, each one bringing out some value. Hanuman's relationship with Ram, Hanuman's relationship with Sita, Hanuman's relationship with his king Sugriv, whom he serves. He's the prime minister for the Vanaras. The Vanaras are an ape-like race of beings who were Ram's ally in this great adventure to recover Sita, who was stolen away by Ravana, the king of the Rakshasas, or demon race. Just for those of you who don't know the story, I think everyone here probably knows the story basically. So going through these passages, and I think Krishna Das described it as, the first level is just watching Hanuman's pastimes, experiencing like we're right behind his right shoulder, going on the journey with him. And we imbibe all the qualities that Hanuman has, his extraordinary perseverance, his eloquence, his power, his zeal for service, his compassion, his kindness, his tenderness, his unbelievable power when he needs it. So that's the first level. We're imbibing these qualities of Hanuman, just watching him going through his pastimes in the Ramayana. The second level is we're going on this journey. We're going on this journey with him because Hanuman comes of age in the Ramayana. There was a curse by the rishis that Hanuman forgot his own power because he was very mischievous when he was young. A curse was placed on him by the rishis. He did not remember who he was until the key point in the Ramayana. Then he matured into his full power, which is a beautiful metaphor for us. As I'm talking about this, these 40 passages and how we created, I feel like now it might be a good time I pulled out 3 excerpts from the production. One, my introduction, my welcome, and then Krishna Das's beautiful introduction to it. And then one of the actual excerpts. So why don't we, just to give a flavor, this is just a 1-minute clip of my welcome to the project. It'll give you a flavor of how the whole thing begins. Welcome to Hanuman's Leap of Faith. We are about to embark on an extraordinary adventure, following the tracks of that pure and devoted soul, Hanuman. And when I say the word track, it could mean Hanuman's trail, as he was of an ape-like race of beings called the Vanaras. But also, in another sense, we are following the track of the wind. Because as we know, Hanuman is the son of the wind god, Vayu, the generator of our very life breath, our life force. So as we embark on this journey, you could say we are following the flow and direction of our own life force. And for Hanuman, his life force is always directed in devoted service to Ram, the central hero of the Ramayana. In this production, we will be listening to almost everything Hanuman thinks, says, and does in the epic Ramayana, which for Hanuman is always expressed through devoted service to his beloved Ram, the embodiment of wholeness, the light of life in the heart of everyone. And everything I'm saying here applies not only to Ram, but also, of course, to Sita, the embodiment of the divine feminine, and Ram's partner in dharmic life. Krishna Das, I was just thinking, you talked about that Hanuman is the breath of Ram. And I guess that's one of the things that I was just mentioning in that. Because Hanuman is the son of the wind, Vayu, the prana that animates the whole universe. That's the way I've always seen it. I see that Hanuman is that, the prana that animates. It's the life force. Takes the abstraction of Ram's absolute level and puts it right here in our heart, right here in our lungs, right here in our breath. Everything that moves is Hanuman. Any thoughts on that?
No.
I caught you off guard there.
No, I just don't know what to say. we talk about these things. We talk about, and we tell these stories, and we try to learn from them. But we don't really know what we're talking about yet. This is our path. This is our spiritual work, to recognize and realize what these things really are, who these beings really are. And Ramana Maharshi said, if you don't know who you are, how can you know what God is or who God is? So it's a very interesting path. We can talk about these stories, we can learn from them, they can help us grow. We also have to recognize, we also have to have some humility and understand that we don't really know who Hanuman is, who Ram is, who Sita is. We don't know these things. We can recognize that these are truths that we so far haven't been able to realize in ourselves. We still identify with our me-ness, our separateness, our egos. But through the relation that we have with this story of the Ramayana, we can free ourselves from this false separateness that we have, and really experience ourselves what this is really about. And that's the point of all this stuff, is to actually experience it yourself. Really experience it, not in the head, not in the emotions, but in our soul, our deepest place. And that's something that takes time and sincere, devoted attention and practice. Yeah, I always think it's like a ripening process, It's not really about learning, it's about exposing ourselves to the sun of this ultimate reality, and to be ripened by that, and lose all the chains and untie all the knots that we have in our hearts, and all the pain and the betrayals and the suffering that we carry with us. Because we see Ram go through extraordinary tortures and Sita go through extraordinary torture without ever really losing it. That's what, the idea of this Ramayana is that it's Lila, Lila, which is a very, very subtle concept. But in this case, it's a story, it's a play that's acted out by the divine in order to free us from suffering. There's none of these beings in the story have any agenda of their own. They are all manifesting for our sake, to free us of our unhappiness and bring us real love. So on one level, that's the real meaning of all this that we've been talking about. And through becoming acquainted and familiar with these stories, this story, our shape actually begins to change. And the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, our own motivations begin to change as we experience through the story, through the Leela, what it means to serve, what it means to love, what it means to overcome negativity, and in the story, the biggest demon that ever lived. So a guy used to gobble up human beings for breakfast, and dessert. Bad guy. So how that's overcome by ultimate goodness and ultimate love, real love, and the power of real love. So someday, hopefully, we'll know what these stories really mean and who these beings really are.
Well, that was a great answer, because you brought up this beautiful concept of Leela, one of my favorites, divine Leela. Being my background was originally as a performance artist and dancer, so Leela from the more expressed level to the most cosmic level of Leela. And the Ramayana, what it is, Ramayana, it's the cosmic journey of Ram. And I kind of, our colleague Philip Lutkendorf, I'm bringing his name up again, I've used a term that he coined, the Hanumayana. That's what I think of this project, Hanuman's Leap of Faith, is a Hanumayana. We're going through Hanuman's Leela. It's just a different perspective. It's like almost retelling the entire story of the Ramayana from Hanuman's perspective. And when you go into it, it's like, you're right, as Krishna Das says, it doesn't always make sense. When you go through these passages, you listen to these 40 passages, the languaging sometimes it's ancient, although it's also very modern in some respects. But it's shaping us, just as KD just said, it's shaping us, chipping away from that outer shell. I like to think of our outer shell of our being is being chipped away by more and more knowledge, more and more experience of who Ram is, who Hanuman is, who Sita is, and just their awareness, our awareness on them, and their awareness inside of us begins to shape us, expand us, mold us. You know, I've always had a deep love for the Veda and Vedic literature, but it was all very abstract. When I found that there was a branch of Vedic literature that was in story form, which was the Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's called the Itihasa branch of the Vedic literature. This was it for me, because I just love profound epic adventure. And here it's really the Ramayana and the Hanumayana, it's a Leela of it's not only a story out there, it's a story inside of us. Because the Veda is the very fabric of creation, Veda created creation, when we learn about this, when we listen to this story, there's a unique familiarity with it, which is so beautiful, because it's the stirring of the impulses of our own nature. I even remember way back when I first released the first book of the Ramayana, and my first audio production, the first volume. My nephews, Brady and Todd, were like 12 and 14, and I played it. They had no idea of any of this kind of knowledge, and I played it for them, and they said, "Uncle Mike, this is like very familiar. Like I've heard this before. This sounds like our story." So that's the power of the Ramayana. It is the unfolding story. Your own. It's not only, it is not Ram and Sita's Leela, it's our Leela. And as you listen, you're just attuning. We're attuning like a tuning fork into this very nature of Ram, Sita, and Hanuman. I hope this project begins to resonate with you on that level. And speaking of which, I'd like to throw, maybe let's listen to Krishna Das for a moment here from his introduction, Hanuman, the Ultimate Devotee. It's a 2-minute clip. You'll get a flavor of Krishna Das, just another flavor of what we've just heard from him live here, semi-live.
Hanuman is fully immersed in the love that lives within us. He's immersed in the love that is our own true nature. So when we open to Him, when we invoke His presence, we enter into the presence of real love. This is the love that lives within us already as our own true nature. Hanuman is always present in all the 3 times: the past, the future, and right now. He is an immortal, a Chiranjeevi. He is always available to us to connect to, and in so doing, connecting to our inner truth, the inner being, ultimate reality. Prayers like the Hanuman Chalisa invoke His presence. The repetition of these prayers clean the mirror of the heart, the mirror of the mind, so that what is reflected is true, is real. The dust on the mirror of our hearts, the anger, the greed, the selfishness, the fear, the anxiety, the shame, this is what the dust is on the mirror of our hearts. When we clean that mirror, we can experience reality directly. And it's Hanumanji, with his loving, powerful presence that supports our work, our spiritual work, and leads us back home to the One.
You know, you just referenced prayers like Hanuman Chalisa. I don't know, Krishna Das, do you think this might be a good time to go into Krishna, to do a Hanuman Chalisa?
Maybe. Maybe I'll do, I was thinking of doing, maybe at the end I'll do a Chalisa. Right now I think I'd like to sing with the Bajrang Ban, it's called. Ban
Okay.
means weapon or arrow. And this chant is, they say the sadhus do this in the jungle when they get scared. You know, they're out there. There's lions, there's tigers, there's all kinds of stuff going on in the middle of the night. And so they sing this Bajrang Ban. And it's one of the practices that Siddhima gave to me to do. So. Jai prema pratiti de vinaya kare sanama tike karaj sakalashu siddha kare Hanuman Jaya Hanumanta sant hitakari sun लीजिए प्रभु अर्ज हमारे चमके काज विलंबन कीजिए अतुर दौड़ मासुक दीजिए जैसे खुदी सिंधु वही पारा सुरसा बदन पेते बिस्तार आगे जाए लंकिनी रोक मरे हुलात गई सुरलोक जय विभीषण को सुख दीन्हा सीता निरखी परम पद लीन्हा पावु जाड़ सिंधु वही पारा सुरसा बदन पेते बिस्तार आगे जाई लंकिनी रोका मरे हुलात गई सुरलोक जय विभीषण को सुख दीना सीता निरखी परम पद लीना बाग उजाड़ सिंधु ही पार सुरसा बदन पेत बिस्तार आगे जाए लंकिनी रोक मरे हुलात गई सुरलोक जय विभीषण को सुख दीन्हा सीता निरखी परम पद लीन्हा बाग उजाड़ सिंधु ही पार अतिया थोड़े अमकातुर थोड़ा अक्षय कुमार को मारि संहार लूमल पे तिलंक को झाड़ रासमान लंक जड़ गई जय जय दुर सुरपुर मुंबई अब विलंब के कारण स्वामी कृपा करो उड़ अंतरयामी जय 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 हनुमंत जय 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 हनुमंत अगाधा दुख पवत जन के अपराधा पूजा जप तप नेम उचारा नहीं जानत हूँ दास तुम्हारा पन पवन मग गिर गह माही तुम्हारे बल हम डरपत नाही पाई परो कर जोड़ी मनाओ यही अवसर अब के गहराओ जय अंजनी कुमार बलवंत शंकर सुवन वीर हनुमंत बदन कराल काल कुल घालक राम सहाय सदा प्रतिपालक भूत प्रेत पिशाच निशाचर अग्नि वैठल कालमणि इहे मारुतो शपथ राम की रघुनाथ मर्याद नाम की जनक सुता हरदास कहावो, ताकि शपथ विलंब न लाओ। जय 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 धुनि होत आकाश, सुमिरत होत दुसह दुख नाश। चरण शरण कर जोड़ी मनाओ, यही अवसर बखे द्वारों। उत उत चल तोय राम दोहाई, पाए परों कर जोड़ी मनाई। छम 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 चपल चलंत, ओम हनु 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 हनुमंत। ओम हम हम कदेत कपि चंचल, ओम सम सम सहमि पराने कलदल। अपने जन को तुरत उबारो, सुमिरत हो आनंद हमारो। यह बजरंग बाण जेह मारे, ताई को पिर कौन उबारे। पात करे बजरंग बाण की, हनुमत रक्षा करे प्राण की। यह बजरंग बाण जो जापे, थे थे भूत प्रेत सब कांपे। धूप दे अरु जपे हमेश, ताके तन में रहे कलेश। प्रेम प्रतिति कपि बजे, सदा धरे उर ध्यान। थे के कार्य सकल शुभ, सिद्ध करे सिद्ध करे हनुमान, सिद्ध करे।
I want to. Krishna Das sent me a recording of that just a few days ago. I've had a few challenges recently. Challenges are HANUMAN'S, the name of his game, the death of some members, close members of my family, and some just challenges with this project as well at times. And Krishna Das told me the story of that and just said, play this nonstop. So for the last 48 hours, I've been playing that chant, and boy, it works. Things have really smoothed out, just smooth. So thank you. That Hanuman Chalisa has a certain value on the heart level, but this one seems to clear the path and in a major way.
Well, I don't know, but Siddhima looked at me once and she said, you have Hanuman Chalisa, of course, but don't forget Bajrang Ban. That's what she said.
Yeah. You don't mess with Bajrang Ban. It's just, there's so many facets of Hanuman. Hanuman was a skilled musician as well. I mean, you could go through the Ramayana, the Hanumayana, and he was the most extraordinary minister, skilled as a counselor, a master psychologist, warrior. His prowess as a warrior is unparalleled. It's just amazing how many facets of Hanuman, and that's explored a little bit in the Hanuman Chalisa, how many different facets he has. And as we look at each facet of Hanuman, it enlivens a facet within us as well. But I'm just curious, how does this whole exploration of Hanuman for you, like we've talked about it on a personal level, but on a collective level, why is Hanuman so relevant now in terms of this age of transfer, the place we are right now in society, in the world, division and so on? I guess what's his relevance right now?
I don't know. We need it for sure. But it's true. It's only the last few hundred years, and certainly since Tulsidas, and then in the last 100 years or so, that Hanumanji's become such a popular being. There's little temples for him everywhere. Little roadside temples, big temples, little temples all over, everywhere you go, and especially in northern India. In the south, there's not as much, but in the south, they have Ganesha, who's very similar in terms of removing obstacles and that kind of thing. So it's mostly in the north that Hanuman's appreciated that way. Just so many obstacles to overcome these days. Just to get up and get to the bathroom in the morning is sometimes a serious affair.
Yeah, Hanuman for me is just, he's a guide that stays with us, that pierces through obstacles. There's an inner power in him that, like, he doesn't take anything personally. He never, ever in the entire Ramayana complains. I mean, I'm giving you simple, like, practical things. He never, there doesn't seem to be much or any ego structure there at all. I mean, Ram, at least it could be a Leela, but Ram does appear to get overshadowed. He gets overshadowed when absolutely shows entire equanimity until Sita is taken away. And Hanuman really ultimately saves the day on so many levels. He's the one who restores Sita's faith because she's on the level, she's ready to commit suicide because she's being basically harassed and tortured by the Rakshasi guards and by Ravana himself, playing tricks on her mind, psychological tricks, fear. Hanuman restores her faith. That's what happens in Sundarakanda. And Hanuman, at every step of the way, he shows what skill in action is. Skill in action in a way that pierces through not only the ignorance of us watching, but the ignorance of everyone around. And that's what these different passages from the Ramayana reflect to me, is that each one reveals a certain facet of Hanuman and how there's a saying in the Veda, what you see you become. What you see we become. One level is what you put your attention on grows in your life. That's a kind of a New Age maxim. But what you see you become. When you put your attention on Hanuman, when you put your attention on Ram and Sita, you become that. And according to those impressions, you make your way in life. So that's maybe a segue into, I'd like to play one clip. Well, before I do that, I want to actually say how this interweaving happened. In this production, the first hour or so is Krishna Das and I setting the stage, laying all the groundwork of the Ramayana, Hanuman, who everyone is, how you can listen to this, what the meaning, significance, and impact. But as I said, the centerpiece are these 40 passages from the Ramayana featuring Hanuman. But because not everyone knows every aspect of the story, and because they're spaced out, I become the storyteller. My narration, I narrate where this particular scene comes in the story. And that goes on for a while. We have 4 hours of excerpts from the Ramayana in this production. And then the closing part is Krishna Das and I coming back and trying to wrap it all up and integrate this whole experience. So that gives you a little bit of the structure of the production. So I wanted to play one excerpt where there's a little bit of my narration in one scene, and this scene is where Hanuman first meets Ram. So calmed by Hanuman's advice, Sugriv gives Hanuman a mission to go and meet Ram and Lakshman and to assess the intentions of these two godlike men. So in this scene, Hanuman finally meets his beloved Ram. And if there ever was a model of love at first sight, this divine meeting certainly fulfills that vision. But actually, it goes beyond just love at first sight. It's devotion meeting devotion, wisdom meeting wisdom, truth meeting truth, providing insight into the grand scheme of life, as Ram and Hanuman innocently enliven and thrill to their ancient bond.
Canto 3. Ram praises Hanuman's eloquence. Taking in the purport of the mighty Sugriva's words, Hanuman took a flying leap from the Rishamukha mountain to the place where the scions of the Raghus were to be found. With a crafty design, the ape Hanuman, the son of the wind god, showed himself to them not as a monkey, but disguised as a mendicant ascetic. Approaching the signs of the Raghus deferentially and making his salutations, Hanuman addressed those warriors in an ingratiating voice, and using pleasing words, praised them sincerely. Honoring them, as was befitting, Hanuman, the best of apes, addressed in gentle words that came from the heart those men whose valor knew no impediment. How is it that you, who with your brilliant complexion look like the royal sages or gods, and yet are ascetics under rigorous vows, who have come to this region? You frighten the herds of deer and other wild creatures as you go along looking at the trees that grow on the banks of the Pampa. Who are you? Ascetics clad in tree bark, that add beauty to this stream of pleasant water with your golden complexions. You are, obviously, men of courage, though you heave deep sighs. And with your mighty arms, your leonine looks, and the lion's extraordinary strength and prowess, you make all creatures here distraught with fear. With bows in your hands that look like Indra's bow, and show that you are mighty slayers of the foe, you dazzle the eyes of the beholder by your splendor and beauty.
That reminds me, Krishna Das, of the story you told at the very beginning of this of our session here today about what it was like meeting Maharaji for the very first time. You know, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about just that experience and how it relates, you know, this meeting between Hanuman and Ram. I always find it fascinating because there's only a short bit in the Ramayana where you meet Hanuman before he meets Ram. You get a glimpse of him with his King Sugriv and how he serves him. And then as soon as you meet Hanuman, and then very next scene, he meets his beloved Ram. And nothing has ever been the same. And I know maybe you feel that same way, that nothing has ever been the same after meeting Maharaji.
Well, yeah, nothing's ever been the same. But then again, because of my own bullshit, it hasn't been that different. Nothing's been the same, but you know, whereas Hanuman immediately had full faith and almost full realization of who he is and who Ram is. Even if I had a moment of that with Maharaji, my own stuff covers that up and cloaks it in darkness, you could say. But from that point in that moment in my life until this point, everything has been about trying to remove that cloak of darkness. So in some sense, that was the beginning of the path for me in this life. And for Hanuman, that was the beginning of his real service to Ram when he first met them. So I tried to serve my guru also the same as best I can, with whatever, as they say in the Ramayana, according to my own poor lights, my own dim light. So, you know, you just do the best you can. And recognize that things did change completely for me inside. But, you know, I have this image of, we were on a train, all the Westerners, and who knows where we were going. We were on this train of our lives, and it stopped in a station on the way, and we looked out the window, and there was Maharaji. So we all ran off the train, leaving everything behind, and we ran off the train, and we were with them, and then he put us back on the train, back into our lives. We walked out of our lives in a way when we were with him physically. And then, as he used to say, transfer ho jayega. I'll transfer you. I'll send you back. And he did. He sent us all back to America to work through our karmas. But he did light us up first, which for sure. And you see that in Hanuman. You see how when he first meets Ram, everything else disappears. He continues his work with Sugriv, his role, but his real boss is Ram at that point. After that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like Sugriv had been a friend of Hanuman since childhood, and Hanuman grew up serving him already since childhood. But he just graduated to an entire different level. And then the beauty of it was that Hanuman, as he said, he did not have a sense of his own power up until he met Ram. And even then, it took a while for it to unfold. And it wasn't until he was on the shore of the southern sea, the King Sugriv sent out, Sugriv and Ram made an alliance, a compact, to support each other in their mission. Sugriv would help Ram recover Sita, and Ram would help Sugriv regain his throne. Because his elder brother Vali, had kicked Sugriv out, exiled him, and Vali was not such a great dude. And anyway, Ram helped Sugriv regain his throne. So Sugriv sends out search parties in the 4 directions, to the 4 corners of the world, to find the whereabouts of Sita. And only the search party that went to the south, led by Hanuman and Vali's son Angada, had any results. And they're finally...
And when Hanuman's party left, before they left, Ram takes his ring and he gives it to Hanuman. Because, see, Ram, the incarnation as Rama, he was supposed to act like a perfect human being. And he wasn't supposed to know that he's God. So he acted like a human being, but when he had to, he showed that he knew who he was. So here, when they leave, just before they leave to search for Sita, he takes his ring off and he says, when you meet Sita, give her my ring and give her this message. So he gives her a message. Right. So he already knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then they go off.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And so anyway, just to finish this one part of the story, but so there's this confluence, this event, this Leela that you're both in and you're also witnessing from Ram's perspective. But finally there was it's a lot to the story to tell, but there was an eagle, Sampati, who befriended the Vanaras who were camped on the southern shore of the sea, ready to fast to death because they've exceeded the time limit that Sugriv gave them. Sampati looks across the 100 yojanas across to the island fortress of Lanka and sees that Sita is held in captivity there. But none of the Vanaras can imagine crossing the inviolable sea. And then Hanuman is sitting there quietly, just absorbed in the self, like Krishna Das said. Whenever there's nothing to do, he's just absorbed in the self, in bliss, in that Ram in his heart. And Jambavan, the king of the bears, begins to exhort Hanuman. Hanuman, remember who you are. Hanuman is very ancient. He remembers who Hanuman is. And Jambavan begins to tell Hanuman his own nature. He describes his lineage, where he came from, who his father was, and the power that he had. Hanuman swells in size, gigantic size. Hanuman had this extraordinary ability to expand to the biggest cosmic level and down to the infinitesimally small level, just like our own consciousness. And then Hanuman remembers who he is, and crosses the ocean, flies across the ocean, which is the Hanuman's leap of faith. And that's that's the beginning of Sundarakanda, which is really probably one of the most beautiful. Sundara means beautiful. It is the beautiful section of the Ramayana. And maybe you have some commentary on Sundarakanda, just its significance, its value for restoring our faith right now at this point in our life.
Yeah, Maharaji had Sundarakanda read every Tuesday wherever he was, especially in the temples, whenever he's in the temple. And one time, many years after Maharaj had left the body, I was staying at Kenchi, and one of his great old devotees was there. He was 86 or 87 at the time, I think. His name was Papa, called him Papa, K.R. Singh. And so I was leaving for America. I went to see him, say goodbye. And I said, Papa, I'm leaving. He said, okay. He said, and he says, do you sing Hanuman Chalisa? And I said, yeah. He said, why? I said, to praise Hanuman. He says, does Hanuman need your praise? I said, no. He said, then why? I said, I don't know. He said, we sing Hanuman Chalisa to remind Hanumanji of his powers. And then we ask him to help us. And then as I was leaving, he said, by the way, he said, I bless you, I bless you. I said, and then he said, I bless you to become president of the United States. So I'm announcing my candidacy for the next election. I'm going to run for president of the United States. Thank you.
It might be I'm not going to say a word, but I'm sure that.
Mine before then, but as of today, you know. I got the blessing.
So I just got.
Try to use it, right?
Whenever I would have conversations with Krishna Das, there would be a certain point he said, yeah, we've talked enough about this. And maybe we've reached that point tonight of talking enough about Hanuman. As he said, the main thing, it's on the level of our experience. And I'm hoping, this has been a real, spending the last 6 months pouring through the Ramayana, living, eating, breathing, and sleeping Hanuman. Finally a chance to kind of expand my perspective of Ram to focus on this doorway to Ram through Hanuman, opening my heart as much as that shell is being pulled away, and this opening process. And I'm hoping, if you're inspired to listen to Hanuman's Leap of Faith, you'll get the same benefit of all these layers that we've put together, the narration, the stories, the excerpts. And I should qualify, when we were playing those excerpts from it, we've enhanced the audio clips. Those are beautiful images put together by my videographer, Werner Elmker. And so this is an audio production. And I would say that it's part, you could call it an audio book. I would say it's almost more like a course on Hanuman than just a standard audio book. It's 7 hours long. It's a very deep experience. And I think Krishna Das and I have talked about the fact that it's not the kind of audio book that as I said, it's more like a course. Listen to it. I'm encouraging you to listen to it in sections. Savor every moment. When you listen to a particular passage, enlivening Hanuman, seeing him, just an example, when he's consoling Tara, who's the wife of Vali. Ram has slain Vali on the battlefield to help Sugriv regain his kingdom. And Tara is mourning her beloved husband. And Tara was a highly evolved soul, one of the most beautiful and intelligent Vanaras. Hanuman comes in to console Tara. This is just one example that is coming to my mind. And just the way Hanuman consoles her, just this incredible wisdom and intelligence and that beautiful voice. There's so many scenes like that. Of course, you could go right to the next scene, but just let yourself savor into it. Make it a sadhana. Take 9 days to go through this whole thing, or take 30 days to go through this whole thing. So that just gives you a flavor. And I also want to say that there's a partnership in this. The Love, Serve, Remember Foundation is kind of part of this whole thing. It'll be available through them. Hanuman's Leap of Faith will be available first and foremost through Krishna Das's website. Also, it'll be available through my own website, my landing page, Hanuman's Leap of Faith. Also will be available at ramdas.org, which is the website for Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. Why don't we show just the cover art again? We'll come back to that slide in a second, just so you get a flavor of this. This has been, we hope you've given, many different facets from different angles, what this project is all about. And most important, I really want to get across, it's not just another audiobook. I really am, as we put this together, we're trying to help you, push you through that doorway, push us through that doorway to the divine, where that living presence of Ram lives in our hearts. Just like Hanuman. Let's show the websites one more time, and then make a little special offer for everyone who's listening here. Is just, if you're listening to this broadcast, if you go to whether it's krishnadas.com or Hanuman's Leap of Faith, you'll go eventually to the shopping cart, put in KD10, and you'll get a 10% discount. That's just a special offer for the people who are listening to this broadcast here today, and in the future when you're watching it on YouTube. So, enough blah, blah, blah. Oh, and anything you want to add before we close, before we go to Hanuman Chalisa?
Just that these are, this is a living path. This is you're entering into a lineage of Hanuman and a lineage of Ram. These are living realities. In some ways, they're more real than we are, and we think we are. And so by exposing ourselves to these eternal truths, these eternal leelas, we can free ourselves from from the level of this kind of emotional and physical turmoil that we're in, especially in these pretty crazy days. So a very powerful practice, and it's a very it's offered in that way to us. And I got a lot out of this today, just talking about it and being with it. I'm looking forward to going back into the Ramayana and diving deeper myself. So I hope this inspires you to find a way through the jungle of suffering and find your own happiness, your own true self, and the love that lives within you. So thank you, Michael. We'll sing Hanuman Chalisa and Little Sri Ram Jai Ram.
Thank you, KD Krishna.
Shri Guru Charan Saroj Raja Nij Mana Mukar Sudhari Varuna Raghubar Bimala Jasu Chodaya Palachar Buddhihin Tanu Janake Sumiram Pavan Kumar Siaram Balabudhi Vidya Dehu Mohi Haro Kales Bika Syavara Ramachandra Padaje Sharanam Jaya Hanuman Gyana Guna Sagar Jaya Kapi Sati Loka Puja Amaduta Tulita Baladhama Anjani Puta Pavana Sutana Abir Bikram Bajarangi Kumat Nivar Sumati Kesangi Anshana Varana Viraj Subesa Kanana Kundala Kunchita Kesa Hat Bajra Dvaja Biraje Kande Munza Jane Usad Shankar Suvan Kesari Nanda Teja Pratapa Mahajagavan Deavan Guni Ati Chatu Amakaj Karibeko Atur Charit Suni Beko Rasya Ramalakan Sita Basi Sukshma Rupa Darasya Hindika Karta Rupa Daralanka Jara Bhima Rupa Dare Asur Sanare Ramachandra Ke Kaj Samar Lai Sajivan Lakan Jiyai Shri Raghubir Harshura Lai Raghupati Kinhi Bhot Barai तुम मम प्रिय भरताय समभाई सहस बदन तुम रोज सगाओ सकै श्रीपति कंठ लगाओ नकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीस नारद शारद सहित अहिस कुबेर दिगपाल जहान थे कभी को बिद खाई सके कहां थे उपकार सुग्रीव कीन राम मिलाया राज्य पद दीन मरो मंत्र विभीषण मान लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जान सहस्त्र जो जन पर बान लील्यो थाई मधुर फल जान प्रभु मुद्रिका मिले मुख माही चल दिलंगी गए अचरज नाही गम खाज जगत के जेते सुगम मुगत तुमरे ते राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे होतना गया बिन पैजार सब सुख लाहे तुम्हारी शरण तुम्हारा छक काहू पोदा आपन तेज समारो आपे तीनों लोग हांकते कांपे भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे महावीर जब नाम सुना नासे रोग हरे सब पीर जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीर संकट ते हनुमान छुड़ावे मन क्रम बचन ध्यान जो लावे तप पारा राम तपस्वी राजा तिनके काज सकल तुम साज और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे सोय अमित जीवन पल पावे चारों युग प्रताप तुम्हारा है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियार साधु संत के तुम रखवारे असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे अष्ट सिद्धि नौ निधि के दाता असवर दीन जानकी माता अमर सायन तुम्हारे पास सदा रहो रघुपति के दास तुम्हारे भजन राम को पावे जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे अंत काल रघुबर पुर जाए जहाँ जन्म हरे भक्त कहाए और देवता चित्त न डरे हनुमत से सर्व सुख करे संकट कटे मिटे सब पीरा जो सुमिरे हनुमत बलबीर जय 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 हनुमान गोसाई कृपा करो गुरुदेव की नाई जो सत बार पाठ कर कोई छुत ही बंदी महास कोई होया पर हनुमान चालीसा होया सिद्धिसा की गौरीस तुलसीदास सदा चेरा की जय नाथ हृदय महादेव पवन तनय संकट हरण मंगल मूर्ति रूप सियाराम राम लखन सीता सहित हृदय बसर सुरभूप यावर रामचंद्र पद जय शरण मंगल मूर्ति मारुत नंदन सकल मंगल मूल निकंद मंगल मूर्ति मारुत नंदन सकल मंगल मूल निकंद श्री राम जय जय राम 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 राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय जय राम सीताराम 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 जय सीताराम 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 राम लक्ष्मण जानकी जय बोलो हनुमान ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, 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 Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram. Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki. Jai Siya Ram Jai Jai Hanuman, Sankat Mochan Kripa-Nidan. Jai Siya Ram Jai Jai Hanuman, Sankat Mochan Kripa-Nidan. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, 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 Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki, Ram Lakshman Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. So, if we know anything about a path at all, if we know there might be a way to live in this world in a good way, with an open heart, without fear, it's only because of the great beings that have gone before us on this path. Out of their love, out of their kindness, they left some footprints for us to follow. So, in the same way that they wish for us, in the same way that they wish for us, we wish that all beings everywhere, all of us, be safe, be happy, that all of us have good health and enough to eat. And may we all live in peace and at ease of heart, at ease of heart with whatever comes to us in life. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Bolo Bajranga Bali Hanuman ki jai. Namaste everybody, namaste, Ram Ram. Take good care. We'll see you soon.